If I could have your attention, please. Call the public hearing to order. This time I'll read the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you've reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles. At this time, clerk, please read the call. No, excuse me. If you'll register your presence by voting yes.
Okay, you have 18 present and 3 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. If you would read the call, please.
Notice of public hearing in accordance with Tennessee Code annotated section 13-7-105, the Board of County Commissioners of Blount County, Tennessee will convene in a called meeting and hold public hearing on October 9, 2012 at 6:30 p.m. at the Blount County Courthouse Commission Meeting Room for the following proposed amendment to the zoning resolution of Blount County, Tennessee, being Resolution 00-06-010, a resolution to amend the zoning resolution of Blount County, Tennessee by amending section 7.5.1.4 to permit and regulate electronic message centers within the commercial zone and amend section 13 to include a definition for electronic message centers sign.
Ms. Pitts, is that the correct resolution number? 00-06-1010? 12. It's 12-06-010. Would you?
No. This is the zoning resolution.
Zoning resolution, excuse me. We're amending the zoning resolution 00-06-010. This time, would any member of the public like to speak? This time, we'll close the public hearing.
At this time, I'm going to call the Agenda Committee meeting of October 9th, 2012 for the Blount County Commission in order. Please register your presence here. Mr. Moon.
You have 18 present, 3 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before we continue, I would like to bring one point of order that the agenda that was published and the agenda that we have on our computers for this evening, item G3 needs to be other budget items. There is an item that is on our agenda on the computer that does not need to be there this evening. That needs to be removed. And if that wants to be discussed, then it would need to be brought up as a point of order to suspend the rules. With that being said, at this time, I will now then take public input of items on the agenda. Not yet. I'll move for approval of agenda minutes from September 11th, 2012. We have a motion made and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote.
You have 18 yeses.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, I would move for a setting of the agenda. Ms. Lambert made the motion. Mr. Moon seconded. Any discussion on the? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Mr. Samples. I'm getting used to having to look back at the screen.
Been there and done that. Under item 3, other budget items, the item you referenced was what we talked about in the budget committee last night, and I do have a resolution which I understand is on the computer to redirect the money that will be saved if the sales tax referendum passes and placed in the debt service line. And I would like to have that placed on the agenda tonight so we can vote on it next week. Now, if we need to suspend the rules to do that, or if we can do it with a simple vote here to place it on the agenda, I'll defer to your.
Mr. Samples, last night when you made that comment, I made the, you asked me last night if it was going to have to be done by suspension of the rules. And my answer last night is it would need to be done by suspension of the rules because it was not on the printed agenda for the budget committee when it was printed last week when we approved the agenda. So it would need to be done as a suspension of the rules.
But you have a motion on the floor. Can I move to suspend the rules to consider this?
You can move to suspend the rules at any time.
All right, I move to suspend the rules to consider this item.
There is a second. Any discussion? We have a motion on the floor to suspend the rules to allow item G3 to be on to the agenda for suspension of the rules. It takes a 2/3 vote to make that pass. The floor is open for discussion. I have no lights lit for discussion. At this time, discussion is ceased, and we ask that you please vote. It takes 2/3 to vote in favor to put item G3 on tonight's agenda.
Okay, you have 9 yeses, 6 noes, 3 abstain, and 3 absent.
I declare that the motion to suspend the rules failed. We will now then go back to the motion that's on the floor. The motion that's on the floor is to set the agenda. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote.
You have 18 yeses.
The agenda has been set for the evening. At this time, we'll move on to item E1, and I don't see anything for item E1. Just give me 1 second. Underneath appointments, we have item 2A, the Little Tennessee Valley Education Cooperative Board. And I believe that is an reappointment of Holden Lail to that board. We We have a motion made by Mr. Farmer and a second by Mr. Moon. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote.
This is to move this item to the consent calendar for the full commission meeting. Is that motion?
That is correct, Mr. Moon. Mr. Samples?
You have 18 yeses.
Mr. Holden's name, or Mr. Lael's name will be moved forward to onto the consent calendar for the full commission. At this time, I will entertain, there is a motion or an appointment for the Smoky Mountain Tourism Development Authority. Pursuant to the private act, the Smoky Mountain Tourism Development Authority forwarded us 3 names ranked in order of preference. And we are to return one, Mr. Farmer.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, in regard to that, in order of preference, I make a motion that we forward Dr. Bogart to the full commission for approval of one of the 2 remaining board positions.
We have a motion to move forward Mr. Bogart, and we have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I will take a, we will now then vote to move Mr. Bogart's name forward into the consent calendar as the recommendation of this body for him to fill one of the 2 vacant positions from the city of Maryville on the Smoky Mountain Tourism Development Board. Please vote.
You have 18 yeses.
Mr. Bogart's name will be moved forward to the consent calendar to fill the vacancy. At this time, there is no unfinished business. We will now move to G1, budget transfers. I'll second. Mr. French, I missed your light earlier. Sorry. That. And let me turn off Mr. Farmer here. I promise before the end of the year I will understand how this all works. Budget transfers, Mr. Vineyard. Can you guide us through what we have here?
The first matter is a transfer from the General Purpose School Fund under contracts and governmental agencies to provide services, mental health services for some students in a residential setting, and it's to be funded from electricity account.
I'll entertain a motion to approve this, to forward it to the full commission. We have a motion made by Mr. Farmer, second by Mr. Helton. Any discussion on this item? Mr. Foltz?
Yeah, this is kind of a strange transfer. We're taking money out of the electricity utility account and using it for mental health. Are we going to be sitting here in May being told that they're coming up short on their electric utility account?
Well, I'm not very good at predicting what we might be told later on, but this was a recommendation from the school system, and the school board has approved it.
Yeah, this is how we go over budget big time. They take money out of the electricity account, and then they come around next May and say, we just don't have enough money to pay the electric bill, and so nobody can say no. I don't think this is a good budget trend at all. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I be allowed to respond to part of this? It was originally brought forward to the Budget Committee to be paid out of fund balance. It was recommended not to be paid out of fund balance, therefore, it is a bill that is due. Mr. Vineyard, am I correct on that? Therefore, it had to come somewhere that it was recommended by the school board that it come out of the electrical account.
That raises another question. If that's the case, why wasn't it budgeted in the first place? Thank you.
It was unknown at the time. It was received after the budget. Am I correct on that, Mr. Vineyard?
That is correct. That was what was reported at the Budget Committee.
Chair, Mr. Moon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe part of this may have been from the result of the governor signing a bill with much fanfare at Pellissippi State Community College, if my recollection is correct, where individuals who have issues and have reached the age of 17, 18, the school system funds their education and cares. Am I somewhat correct on that, Mr. Vineyard, or am I off base?
I'm not aware of anything contrary to what you've said.
Seeing no other lights on the board, please vote to move this forward to the full commission.
You have 17 yeses and 1 no.
Motion passes, will be forwarded to the full commission. Next is budget increases. We have 4 budget increase items. Mr. Vineyard, I'm going to turn you on and let you go over item F1B, which is a $250,000 for the highway capital.
If you'll recall, the commission was presented and you approved a capital budget for the Highway Department, Fund 176. That's funded predominantly, was funded from partial collection of the cable franchise fees. And we get those quarterly. To date, we've only received 1/4 of those revenues. And the highway superintendent has proposed to the budget committee, and they've recommended to you that we use fund balance based on our conversation with the auditors to fund his capital acquisitions during the winter and then replenish fund balance with the cable franchise fees when they're collected.
We have a motion to forward by Mr. Farmer, second by Mr. Carver. We have one discussion. Hold on, Mr. Fultz, I'll turn you on. Okay, Mr. Fultz.
I'm confused. Seems like back around maybe last May or so, we transferred $600,000 to the highway department. And the reason given was that we wouldn't have to do these interim financings. We provided working capital in the amount of $600,000 so we wouldn't have to do this anymore. That's what we were told. Now, why are we doing it?
Mr. Vineyard.
The money is available in reserves in the Highway Fund 131. The Capital Outlay Fund is a new fund in the current operating year. If budget was approved for $285,000, to date we've only collected about 1/4 of that. The Highway Department is basically asking for a transfer, in essence, using its own funds out of its operating account to buy capital and replenish it once all of the cable franchise fee is collected. It's not a loan as the prior transaction, I think, if I reviewed it correctly, was.
So this is just a transfer within highway department accounts.
It's basically allowing the highway general account, Fund 131, to buy the capital equipment and use fund balance to do that, rather than buying the equipment out of Fund 176.
Now, when you say fund balance, are we talking about Highway Department fund balance?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. French?
I guess I'm a little confused too, because when we set the agenda and we voted not to suspend it for the resolution, that's probably going to come to us next month, I assume. My understanding was we're resetting those cable and franchise fees to go into debt service, yet you're talking about when the cable and franchise fees come in now, for this, you're going to repay I'm confused. How are we going to transfer the cable and franchise fees into the debt service and then pay this back with cable and franchise fees already? It's got me a little confused how we're going to do both.
Mr. Samples, would you like to? Yes, you may, Mr. Samples.
My proposal, had we put it on the agenda, was simply this. If the sales tax increase passes, Mr. Dunlap was going to get half of that, which would have amounted to the same amount as the cable franchise fee. Mr. Dunlap told the Budget Committee, and maybe even the Commission, that if it passed, he would give that money back. My proposal was to take the cable franchise fee and apply it directly to debt service, so that this commission would make a statement that we are concerned about the county debt. That would in essence add 2 cents of a tax dollar that we don't have to collect to debt service. $625,000, $630,000. That amounts to 2 cents on the tax rate.
Mr. Samples, you're talking about a motion.
I'm trying to explain to him what the proposal was.
I understand, but I think it could have been clarified a little bit less than.
So you're shutting me up. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Anything else? Any other discussion? Seeing no other lights on the board, please vote to forward this transfer of funds of $250,000 forward to the full commission.
You have 17 yeses and 1 no.
This budget item shall be forwarded to the full commission. Next is item F1C. Mr. Vineyard.
The Sheriff's Department has received a grant from the Department of Justice to acquire some mobile communication equipment, and this proposal is to give them an appropriation to authorize expenditure of $18,000 and change for that communication equipment, and the funding is 100% from a federal grant.
At this time, I'll take a motion to forward to the full commission a motion to amend the increase of the communication equipment of $18,267. Motion made by Ms. Lambert, seconded by Mr. Helton. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote. Mr. Moon?
You have 17 yeses and 1 no.
Motion passes. Next motion is item F1D, the appropriation of the increased expenditure of $12,000 for temporary personnel for the juvenile court. Mr. Vineyard?
we've had an unforeseen medical emergency arise, and there is a need to have an appropriation to fund a replacement on a temporary basis. And the only place and source of funding that we have to do that is from fund balance. The amount of $12,000.
We have a motion made by Mr. Moon and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote.
You have 17 yeses and 1 no.
Motion passes. It shall be forwarded to the full commission for consideration. Next is item F1E. A motion for $255,886 to increase the expenditure budget for the property assessor's office. Mr. Vineyard.
This is a request to appropriate fund balance, also to cover salary and related benefit expenses to continue funding the existing staff in the registrar's office, in the property assessor's office through the remainder of the fiscal year.
I'll entertain a motion. Motion made by Mr. Helton, seconded by Ms. Lambert. Any discussion? Mr. Fultz?
This is a 30% increase in the budget for the assessor. We're now 4 months into the year, and we're looking at a 30% increase. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Is there anybody who can shed some light on this?
Mr. Vineyard?
If you look, excuse me, if you were to look at the original funding request for that office that was submitted when the initial budget process started, the request was for some $400 and some odd thousand more than what was approved by County Commission based on the submission of the previous office holder. And what we're recommending that you consider is $255,000 increase in the cost of the operation of that budget. And if we'd left it on an apples to apples comparison with the previous year, it would have been $415,000 higher.
Why did we have a budget of $764,000, the initial budget? Why was that at that number? Why was it set at that number if that wasn't a real number?
Mr. Vineyard?
That's what was submitted by the prior office holder.
So we've got a request to increase the budget submitted by the prior office holder by 30%. That doesn't look good to me.
Ms. Merle?
That's my question too. How did it get approved at such a discrepancy? Are we hiring new people? Did we cut people's salary to put how did that happen?
Basically, there was funding submitted only to cover the existing staff till sometime around January, February. There are no additional staff that I'm aware of other than what was there to begin with.
So this doesn't represent any kind of pay increase for any of the
No.
employees or
No.
anything? This is just...
Funds existing staff through the end of the fiscal year.
Ms. Marley?
Thank you.
Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, on the Budget Committee, what I remember about this, I'll just throw it out the way it is. The former assessor brought in a budget of, I can't remember how much it was. You said it just a minute ago, but it was 400-something thousand, right? 700. Well, okay. Then, after the election, we were working on the budget. This is after an election, keep that in mind. He came back in and cut that budget down to tremendously. And you can read between the lines. That's all I've got to say.
Mr. Moon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will the assessor be present at the full commission meeting if there are other questions about his budget?
We can certainly send the request to him.
That may be helpful. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing no lights, please vote.
We have 16 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstain.
Motion shall be forwarded on to the full commission. At this time, Mr. Vineyard, thank you. We will now then go to item G4, a resolution to amend the zoning resolution of Blount County, Tennessee by amending section 7.51.4 to permit and regulate electronic message centers within the commercial zone and amend section 13 to include a definition for electronic message center signs. I'll take a motion. We have a motion made by Mr. Kirby and a second by Mr. Carver. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote.
We have 17 yeses and 1 no.
Motion passes, shall be forwarded to the full commission. Next on the agenda is item G5, setting of a public hearing regarding amendments to the zoning regulations regarding ridgetop and hillside regulations. I will take a motion to forward this on to the full commission. Do we have a date, Ms. Pitts, that we can have this public hearing? November the 6th at 6:30. Ms. Lambert, I think you were the maker of the motion. Do you agree to that date? Yes. We have a motion made by Ms. Lambert, second by Mr. Wright, to forward this on to the full commission for a public hearing date of November the 6th at 6:30 in room 430. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote.
We have 18 yeses.
Motion passes. It should be forwarded to the full commission. Next item is item G6, allocation of space requests from the Space Allocation Committee. I believe there's only one item, and I will take a motion to approve the designation of space room 212 in the Blount County Courthouse to the juvenile court. We have a motion made by Mr. Moon, seconded by Mr. Carver. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote to forward this on to the full commission.
We have 18 yeses.
This shall be forwarded to the full commission for consideration. Next is item G7, a resolution adopting regulations to protect water quality in the urbanized areas of Blount County by prohibiting, suppressing, and preventing the contamination of stormwater by grading and erosion and sedimentation. I'll take a motion to forward this on to the full commission. Motion made by Mr. Kirby. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Lambert. Mr. Wright, I will recognize you for discussion.
I've reviewed this quite a bit, and I've got several questions here and as to what we're doing. It appears to me that this is a highly invasion of property rights, just to put it point blank. And the other thing is it seems to circumvent due process. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I would like to have an attorney's opinion on this before we jump into this thing. it's highly restrictive, and things you can do and can't do with your property. For instance, if I interpret this thing correctly, a person can go in unannounced if he has any suspicion that there's any kind of stormwater discharge that shouldn't be. And I've got problems, several questions about this, and I think we need a legal opinion as to what they can and can't do. They can supersede anything that the state of Tennessee right now can do just by sake of our suspicion that we've got a violation. And you've got several things like who sets the amount that you're going to be penalized. There's a lot of unanswered questions here, and I think we, commissioners, we need to take a look at this.
Mr. Wright, as a point, you said you had several questions. Is Mr. Teague in here? I believe Mr. Teague is the author of this document. I'll let you ask questions of Mr. Teague and see how well he can answer them. Mr. Teague, I'm going to turn you on, and Mr. Wright, let me get you highlighted back up there so you can start asking your questions.
When was this proposed resolution drafted?
It was drafted about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago?
Correct. Off the original resolution that was adopted in 2004, approved by this commission body, and then amended and approved again in 2009 by this commission.
So this same resolution was adopted in when?
Initially in 2004.
2004.
And then amended once in 2009.
Well, in my opinion, it's in some instances who was the resolution? Who was it proposed by? I mean, who brought up the who wrote it?
Initially, I did.
You did. Okay.
With comments from TDEC and also reviewed by Norman Newton, the county attorney at the time.
Well, if I read this thing correctly, if I've got a little flower bed out here that I'm going to disturb some area, then I have to have a permit?
No, you do not.
Well, it doesn't say that in here.
This is for construction sites only that disturb. This involves construction sites that disturb 1 acre or more of ground in the urbanized areas of the county.
Well, there's other things that you can be doing on your property besides that. For instance, a garden. If you want to plow up your area for a garden, it may be 1 acre or more. Are we going to have a permit for that?
That is considered agricultural and is exempt.
I'm sorry?
That is considered agriculture practices and is exempt from this resolution.
Well, all right, one of the questions that raised, if you got like a little stream comes through your property and you want to put a bridge across that stream, we're going to have a permit to do that?
Not from Blount County.
Well,
now,
this doesn't say that.
For any permitting for stream crossings, that falls solely upon TDEC, not Blount County. I have no authority. The Stormwater Department has no authority issuing permits for stream crossings. That's solely up to TDEC.
Well, like I say, I'm not an attorney, but that's the way I read this thing.
Attorney has reviewed this.
I'm sorry?
And an attorney has reviewed this in the initial resolution, 2004, by Norman Newton.
Well, like I say, I'm not an attorney, okay? I want everybody to understand that. But I went and looked up several documents, and it appears to me that you can go in on a piece of property and I guess it would be you or someone can penalize somebody, and they wouldn't even have to be given notice. You could just go in and do it and invade private property. That's the way I read this thing. Is that correct?
No. If someone is performing a construction activity disturbing 1 or more acres in the urbanized area of Blount County, and I'm made aware of it, a stop work order will be issued, not a civil penalty.
Well, I'm sorry, but I don't read it that way. the administrative register of 1997, it seems to conflict with it also. And personally, I think before we put this on the citizens right here, we need to understand it thoroughly. I know I do, okay? And we need to understand it from a legal review. I would like to have a legal opinion of it, Mr. Chairman, and I'll make that a motion.
All right, Mr. Wright, you've talked, you've asked some questions, then you've summarized your position. I'm going to, since you stopped asking questions, I'm now going to move to the next in order, which would be Mr. Fultz.
Thank you.
Mr. Fultz, do you have any questions for Mr. Teague?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said that this is the same as a resolution that was passed by this commission in the past? When?
Initially in 2004, and then an amended version of this in 2009. And this before you tonight is another, there's additional amendments.
But this changes some things, does it not?
Yes, there are changes in here, correct.
Okay. So number one, I think it would be very helpful to all the commissioners if we had a document which showed us the original and then the changes, any changes and additions in our package.
That should have been attached with this memo right here.
Well, it's
and
not.
That was in your packet.
It's not. So we need a document that highlights all the changes and additions, number one. And I don't think we should be even spending time on it until we have that from you.
Was this memo not in everyone's packet? It details the amendments. It has websites to the TDEC requirements and the existing resolution on our website. It has a link to that as well. That's it, yes, correct.
Mr. Fultz, apparently it is on the back page. The memo apparently is a 2-page memorandum. And if I believe I'm stepping in here, Mr. Teague, just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same thing. You have a section on page 2 of your memo that says proposed sediment and erosion control resolution changes. Is that what you're referencing?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
Mr. Fultz, do you have any other questions for Mr. Teague?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that sure doesn't make it clear. I think we could do with a document. We usually get from the planning department a document which shows changes, deletions, X'd out, shows additions. And I think we ought to have something like that to go back through and try and figure out this memo is going to be very time consuming.
The initial resolution I was going to send had all the changes highlighted, but I was informed that that document, if it was approved, needed to be clean per se, so signatures could be on there, which showing deletions, highlighted areas could not be on the original document.
Well, we're usually given both in these situations. One additional thing, this seems designed to make lawyers rich, frankly, as I read it. It says, for instance, tell me where this applies in simple language. Where do these rules apply in the county?
As far as in regard to this specific resolution?
Yes. Where do these rules apply in the county? What areas of the county do they apply in?
The urbanized areas of the Blount County.
What is an urbanized area?
It is considered it's done by population density taken from the most recent census.
It's 1,000 people per square mile is how it reads.
Yes.
Okay. Now, tell me something. Where I live, if I pick a highly populated street and pick only a half a mile of it as my sample, I can conclude that it's an urbanized area because it will meet the 1,000 people per square mile. If I define what the square mile is where I measure.
Mr. Fultz, what is your question of Mr. Teague?
Well, that's the question. The question is, what exactly is an urbanized area.
That definition is up to the Census Bureau, and that's all I have to follow for this resolution.
Where does the Census Bureau define urbanized area?
I don't have that language in front of me right now. I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
What document from the Census Bureau defines urbanized area?
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay,
I'm
well,
sorry, I
bring
can't
that
answer
with you to the commission meeting, please. Thank you.
Mr. Moon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Teague, I understand that in discussions with TDEC that we need to act before November 24th
That's correct.
to be in compliance. I've had a couple of constituents calls and recommendations that we go out of the stormwater business, and I asked a person at TDEC, and they said, well, there's 3 criteria in federal law, and Blount County fails on, if you drop any of the 3, you have to manage it locally. Impaired water within the area, in proximity to an urban area, Knoxville. The gentleman explained to me that Knoxville is no fault of Blount County. A piece of water that is a boundary of Blount County is not a problem. Blount County residents, taxpayers can't control that. But he assured me that we can't give it back to the state of Tennessee, and I believe him. So, having said that, Section 11, and I think Mr. Commissioner Folks, very good point. If we had a blue line copy, I know you need to submit a clean one, but if we had a blue line copy designating all the changes, not only the changes, but it'd be very helpful to have what is required by the state of Tennessee. You administer the program, so I'm sure you know the regulations well, and if you could highlight the changes made and also highlight what is required by TDEC. I understand in the discussion, by state law, you have 30 days to act upon the application. Currently, I believe your department turns them around in 3 days. You're proposing, I think, by this document, 10 days. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I don't understand in regard to what.
If someone comes to get a construction permit to excavate, and they bring the plan, the engineering drawing as required, the state told me your office has 30 days to act. As I read in this document, you're proposing 10 days.
Up to 10,
Up to
yes.
10 days. And it's currently how many days?
To return a permit to a,
Yes, sir.
probably more like 2 days.
That's what I understand. Best practice or common practice today in your office is 3 days. I mentioned that to the gentleman at TDEC. There are proposed changes in here that are to the benefit of builders, excavators, property owners. If we went only to what the state required, you could have up to 30 days. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
So you're proposing something that is expediting and trying to be helpful.
Correct.
Section 11 has many items that are very, very bothersome. Consider foreign object or blockage. Would an inspector give any sort of notice to the property owner that any such removal was going to occur? Would the property owners have any recourse with regard to the inspector's decision? There's numerous things in Section 11 that cause, to me and to others, a great deal of concern. There are items there are changes in here that you're being very helpful, but there's a number of items that cause concern. So a blue line copy and what is actually required by state law would be very helpful to this body. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I may answer in regard to what's required by the state, there again, the memo directs you to that. I guess most people were unaware of the memo, but I apologize about that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Teague. These changes here at the end of your memo that's been proposed, why the changes, I guess is what I want to ask. I sat on that stormwater thing with you years ago. We hashed out this, had our differences. You said you created this document 2 weeks ago. I think is what you said. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, all this come about. Why the changes? What was wrong with what we had?
Initially, there's nothing wrong with the document. TDEC has reviewed the document in the past. What has changed is in 2010, TDEC released a new permit for Phase 2 communities, which includes Blount County. And in that permit language, we have to amend our construction policy within 18 months. And that language says that in amending our construction policy, which includes the sediment erosion control resolution we have before us tonight, that resolution has to mimic or at least be as equivalent to the state's construction permit. The state issued their construction permit May 23rd, 2011. So we cannot, in our resolution, require less than what is in the state permit. So we just have to bring our permit up to the state standards. And we had 18 months to get that.
We have 18 months from now?
No, we had 18 months back from when our permit was issued in May of 2011, which puts us to November 2012.
I'm going to ask a question, then why are we now 1 month away from having to do something?
Last month, I had a state audit, an annual report, and a public hearing, and I had to submit a monitoring plan to the state by the end of September. Those items took me probably close to 2 months. In the meanwhile, I'm a one-man show running the stormwater department.
I understand.
So I get to things when I get to them, unfortunately.
I understand that, and I guess my other question would be, of these changes that you've got, and there's a whole page full, how many of them are the state's changes and how many of them are yours or somebody else's opinion, perception, that type of deal?
Every one of these changes are state's changes. I took the state's construction general permit language, reviewed that, and inserted the changes they made into our document, and then had a TDEC representative review that to make sure things looked okay. Basically, there again in the memo, I think 3 or 4 of the items are definitions, and there are additional descriptions or further definitions, explanation. It's probably more than half of what's been on here. The rest of the items, as far as the amendments, more or less are for the engineers when they are designing an erosion control plan to be submitted. So most of it's definitions, further explanation, or procedures a engineer would incorporate into an erosion control plan for submittal to the county. And most of the language in these amendments were taken word by word from the state's construction permit.
That's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question. I have a comment. I don't have any issue at all with the points that my fellow commissioners have brought up, because I'm sure that they have merit. I, however, will not be a party to verbally abusing a county employee trying to do his job. That's all I've got to say.
I'm just, I'm looking at some of these. Well, one thing I'm kind of surprised, 17 months that it took us to get this put together. I still don't understand why we're just a month out from our deadline on this.
When the state issued their new permit for Blount County and other surrounding cities and counties, there were numerous other items that we had to change, create in the meanwhile. This was not the only item. So there's numerous other items that had to be, checked off before I got to this one. Alco and Maryville are in the same situation doing theirs right now as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make it clear what I'd like to see in the commission packet. What is an urbanized area? And you mentioned that there are census documents that show the urbanized areas of the county. I would like those documents in the commission package. Thank you.
Okay, and I can supply a definition and a map as well to show that area. The map as well. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wright?
Yeah, are you telling us now that everything that's in this resolution is mandated by the state? Is that what you're telling us?
To my knowledge, yes.
Well, it appears that, like I say, I'm not an attorney, but there seem to be a lot of conflict here, and if there's changes or anything in here, it ought to be backed up by law, not what somebody interprets. Now, we went through that with the stream buffer thing because TDEC said that they interpreted the law. That don't make it the law. But I think, personally, we need to take a look at this, especially the changes, because it's highly restrictive, and people are, they got rights too, property owners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One comment. I hope the members of the body doesn't feel like we're verbally abusing Mr. Teague. He's making his best effort to give us the answers, and that's very much appreciated. I had no knowledge until Friday that this was even going to be an issue. One question. Section 8, the inspector may require the applicant to provide acceptable security in the minimum amount of $3,000 per acre or fraction thereof for the proposed land disturbed activity prior to issuing the permit. Mr. Chairman, is Mr. Teague saying that this is a requirement of state law?
From my understanding, from what Mr. Teague has said earlier, Mr. Teague, you have the opportunity to correct me, but you said that everything that's in this document was mandated by TDEC.
As far as I'm aware, they have reviewed this. Now, in regard to this section right here, it is a common practice for security fees and bonds to be, or the ability to be required prior to a project. That way, if it's not completed, that project can be completed with the money set aside for that.
Mr. Chairman, my question is $3,000 per acre or fraction thereof appear in state law?
I can't answer that question in regard to that dollar amount at this time. However, like I said, the prior attorney has reviewed this document, and this was in there since then.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Atchley, in a conversation with him today, confirms what Mr. Teague says. There should be a security interest pledged, because during the project, if the developer walks, the state will make sure that everything is taken care of properly by their regulations. They told me there was no specific dollar amount set forth. the security provision's there, it's wise, it's prudent. But, you know, I'm going back to the statement that what is in this document is state law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carver?
So this is related to any land disturbing activity. It's saying development, redevelopment, construction, reconstruction, clearing, grading. So anything that goes on that land, you have to have a $3,000 deposit.
The bill, if desired by the Stormwater Department, I have never in 8 years required this, but it gives us the ability to. If a site will be permitted.
Landscaping and all that.
If there's an acre or more of disturbance in the urbanized area that requires or warrants a grading permit, then yes, then this can come into play, but I've yet to require that money up front.
So it's at your discretion to put a
Yes.
deposit.
Justin, on this 1 acre of disturbance, can you clarify the average house in that construction, not by developers, not by the guy who goes out here, buys himself 2-3 acres and is going to put a house on it, driveway on it, field line on it, is he going to disturb more than 1 acre?
I've not seen one that has disturbed 1 acre yet by building one individual home, no.
Right now, the board is clear for discussion. Mr. Teague, thank you very much for taking the questions and appreciate you standing up here tonight in front of us and giving us the best answers that you can. Mr. Farmer?
Teague, don't run off. I just have one very quick question.
I should have closed them out.
Yes, you should have. Mr. Teague, would it have been possible to have had the county attorney look over this before he came to us? Or have you done that? I know it was done in 2004, and when it was renewed in 2009, I think the county attorney looked over it then again. Would it be possible to have that done again, sir?
Yes, I can have that done, as long as it's okay with the mayor.
Mr. Mayor, since you're here, do you have a problem with us moving this to the county attorney?
Fine. That'll be fine.
Mr. Moon?
Mr. Chairman, in light of the questions and request for legal review, I make a motion we move this to the November committee agenda.
We have a motion made to move this to the November agenda, and we have a second. Any discussion on the motion to move this? Seeing no discussion, please vote on to move this to the agenda. Mr. Moon made the motion, Mr. Helton seconded.
You have 17 yeses and 1 no.
This resolution shall be held over to the November agenda meeting pending legal review, and Mr. Mayor will make sure that the county attorney gets a copy of the resolution. And Mr. Mayor, if you can, please make sure that when the county attorney takes a look at this, he does indicate to us what are the minimum requirements for the state permit and what are the changes that are made to our current resolution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This time, we will now then move on to item G8. We have a motion on the floor to forward G8 forward to the full commission. Do I have a second? We have a second by Mr. Carver. Any discussion, Mr. Samples?
I'd like to ask the sponsor, I noticed this includes the investment committee, and we just appointed a new investment committee. We've not even met yet.
Just hold 1 second, Mr. Moon. I'll let you answer the question as the maker of the resolution.
You've been reading the Daily Times, Commissioner. We appointed a finance committee.
What?
Finance committee.
It's always been referred to as the investment.
No,
committee.
sir. Check the minutes. It's been referred to in the press twice as the investment committee, but the motion was, and what was done was an appointment of the finance committee under the 57 Act and the 93 Act. It is known as the finance committee, to be seated during the term of the trustee, anytime during the trustee, and that's to go out for bids for banks or investment houses per se. Mr. Vineyard, can you clarify this terminology?
If that's the answer, if it's just a question of the terminology, I can accept that.
It is, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Sandals, any other questions? No. Seeing no other lights, please vote on whether or not to forward this on to the full committee and to the full commission.
You have 18 yeses.
At this time, the resolution shall be forwarded on to the full commission. At this time, we'll take public input of items not on the agenda. Ms. King, please come forward.
Thank you. I'm Linda King in District 4. And I'd like to thank the commissioners tonight that spoke up about our property rights. Some of you weren't here back when we had ad hoc committees about quality buffers and stormwater problems that Mr. Teague claimed that we had in the committee, in our community. At that time, we were told there were several things that were mandated to us by the state with phase 1, and now we're talking about phase 2. We found out at that time, there was a lot of us that attended that meeting. I think we had an ad hoc committee for about 8 months, if I'm not mistaken. We met every month. And we kept saying, these things are not mandated. These are regulations you're writing up locally. We do not have to abide by them. And finally, it got so far that at that time, Mayor Cunningham sent our requests about all these issues all the way to Nashville, and we paid big money to have some lawyers there go over what we were told was mandated. And we were at that time told there was no mandate. We had property rights, and they were trying to take our property rights away from us. And he came back from Nashville and got in front of this podium and said, there's no mandate. Who knew? Well, we knew it all along. We kept telling them over and over and over because we were studying the issue. So I'm so happy to hear commissioners questioning it tonight. Property owners deserve to have a right to do what they want on their property without a lot of regulations from our stormwater department or from anyone else in government. So I appreciate it, and I hope you'll show caution when these regulations are brought forth. Thank you.
Anybody else like to make a point of discussion for this evening? Seeing no other discussion, no other lights, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Stand adjourned.